Hello, welcome to your weekly dose of science news from New Scientist. I'm Penny Sarche, and my co-host today is Timothy Revel. Hi, Tim.
Hi, thanks for having me. So today on the show, we have this.
This document is nothing more than an optical illusion. This, in our opinion, will not address the enormity of the challenge we all face. Therefore, we oppose the adoption of this document.
Right, strong words there. It sounds like someone who's very unhappy with, I'm guessing, the outcome of COP29.
Yeah, that's right. There was a deal at the summit last weekend, which is something, but as you can tell, there was some serious unhappiness with it among some of the delegates. And in the show today, we're going to examine what was actually in that deal and where it leaves us.
Also, as the end of the year is fast approaching, later on in the show we'll be talking about the best science books of 2024 and which ones you should be putting on your Christmas list.
Other holidays are, of course, available.
Indeed.
As someone who's very far behind on their Christmas shopping, I'm very much looking forward to that. But before we get to that, we've got another important story that we need to cover, and that's bird flu. Penny, should we talk about that?
Yeah, I'm afraid it's time to talk about bird flu. Now, I was remembering that around this time 5 years ago, we didn't know it at the time, but an unknown coronavirus that went on to cause the COVID-19 pandemic was starting to infect people for the first time. And now here we are 5 years later, and once again there are concerns about another pandemic threat. But the difference this time is it's from a virus we already know about, avian flu, which has been threatening to cross over into humans for quite some time now.
Yeah, it feels like we've been hearing about bird flu for years, but I guess with reports of new infections in animals and people, concern is rising again. And we've got with us Alexandra Thompson, who's been digging into the situation and is here to tell us all about it. Alex, how bad is it?
Well, pretty bad. The flu strain we're hearing about is known as H5N1, and this has been concerning infectious disease researchers for decades. So it's always been pretty widespread in wild birds around the world, but this year it's also been causing outbreaks in farmed poultry and dairy cows in the US.
Yeah, so that did come as quite a surprise, didn't it?
It did. So this all started back in March when a dairy cow in Texas tested positive. And it's worth saying that cattle are not natural hosts for this virus. So as you say, it was quite a surprise.
It's always concerning to be finding bird flu in places where you wouldn't normally expect it. But there is an added worry here, isn't there? Because cows are mammals like us.
Yeah, exactly. So clearly this virus has mutated and evolved to more easily infect, in this case, cows. So it's not only infecting a new animal, but it's gone from a whole new class of animal, from birds to mammals. And it's another opportunity to bring it closer to people. So we're not only conscious now of poultry farmers, we also are closer through dairy farmers. And from that one single cow in Texas, there have since been 650 dairy herds that we know of in the US that have been infected. And most worrying of all, there's also been a few cases in people.
Now, over the years, we've been reporting on bird flu a lot at New Scientist, and there's often this sort of drip, drip, drip of human cases around the world. But it tends usually to be cases where people are having direct contact with animals, often farmed animals, particularly birds. What's different this time?
Well, so far this year, there's been 55 confirmed human cases in the US across 7 states, of which 29 have been in California. So that's really the sort of hotspot of this. So the most recent development is actually the first child in California who has caught the infection, and that was made public on the 22nd of November. It's worth saying, I think the child's got a mild infection and it's fine. But we could be seriously underestimating the number of these infections, because there was a recent study by the US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and that worked with health departments in Colorado and Michigan, which is sort of 2 of the 7 states with human cases. And when blood tests were taken from dairy farm staff who worked with infected cattle, about 7% had antibodies against the infection, despite never having symptoms. So that suggests that there's asymptomatic human cases where people don't know they're infected and it's sort of slipping through the nets.
Well, 7% seems quite high. Of those 55 that you mentioned where we actually know about the cases in the US, were they directly caught from animals?
Most of the cases can be traced back to a poultry or a dairy farm with infected animals. But there's been 2 cases, one in California and one in Missouri, where the source of the infection cannot be traced. So this always raises the concern that perhaps they caught it from an infected person.
I was speaking to a few public health experts this week, and they were particularly concerned about that, those 2 cases that can't be traced back.
Well, yeah, because if the virus gains the ability to easily spread from person to person, or even not easily, just the ability to do it, that could really kick off a big outbreak. But as far as we know, the strains can only be picked up from an infected non-human animal. So it's a bit of a mysterious case, this Missouri and California instances, but we still don't think it can spread between people.
I guess one thing that will be in our minds is we all know from COVID-19 that viruses evolve and they change. And with the virus circulating in so many mammals that are in regular contact with humans, it's starting to feel like it may only be a matter of time before it adapts better to infecting humans.
Yeah, it's so important that we don't become complacent. With every transmission from a cow or a bird to a person, the virus has the opportunity to mutate and possibly acquire that ability to more readily infect people or even pass from one person to another.
I wondered about the role of pigs here because often when we talk about flu, there's bird flu, but there was also swine flu. I remember that pandemic 15 years ago, again, almost exactly.
Yeah, and alarm bells were recently raised because there was the first confirmed case in a pig. So pigs are particularly worrying because they have both human-like and bird-like flu receptors in their upper respiratory tracts. So this means they can be infected by both bird flu and human flu viruses simultaneously. So then you could have like the swapping of genetic material, which is what happened with swine flu, as you said, in 2009.
I feel like it's really hard to know with something like this just how concerned you should be when the numbers, at least the confirmed numbers, are so low. But I guess the question I have to ask is, do we know how deadly this could be in humans?
Well, the slightly reassuring news is that no one in the US who we know has caught it has yet died. They've all had mild cases of conjunctivitis, like eye redness, eye discharge, and some symptoms like cough. So the US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention is saying the risk to the public is still low and the strain is poorly adapted to infect humans. But that could change, as we've discussed. And we know that this virus is actually really dangerous. So since 2003, around 900 people have reportedly contracted it worldwide. And of those, at least half have died from it.
That's a really scary statistic, isn't it? But I guess one thing we should say at this point, and again is familiar from the COVID pandemic, is when you've only got a handful of infections, often you're only detecting the most severe ones, right?
Exactly.
And so it takes more infections and more time to really understand the case fatality rate or just how deadly a virus like that is likely to be.
Yes, and if cases are slipping through the cracks, like we saw with those sort of asymptomatic instances, then it is really hard to monitor how serious this is.
So this situation, presumably it's being monitored pretty closely.
Yes and no. So the US has a surveillance system for bird flu viruses, and since the end of March, they've monitored close to 8,000 people who have been exposed to infected animals. And that led to them identifying 53 human cases. So those remaining 2 cases of the total 55, they came to light via a national flu surveillance programme. But a lot of people are saying this just isn't going far enough, and it's complicated by the fact that different states have different approaches to how they handle outbreaks in animals. And we've got to keep an eye on that to prevent spillover to humans. The recent pig case that we talked about, that was contained by euthanizing the animals. It was on a very small farm. But in the last 30 days, there have been 286 new confirmed cases in cattle, all of which were in either Utah or California. So it does seem to be sort of gathering pace.
Thanks for the update, Alex. We'll be picking your brain in future again, I'm sure, as the situation develops. Right, so back to the annual UN Climate Summit, COP29, held this year in Baku, Azerbaijan. It wrapped up in the early hours of the morning last Sunday. The headline outcome was a last-minute deal on financing for climate action, essentially richer nations agreeing a certain amount of financing to help poorer nations go green. And we've got our news editor, Jacob Aaron, with us today to talk through what went down and what we should make of it. Jacob, is it good news?
In a word, no. So wealthier
Shall we leave it at that?
Wealthier nations left Baku having agreed to pay at least $300 billion a year in grants and low-interest loans to poorer nations by 2035. But lower-income countries, some of which, of course, the most vulnerable to climate change, had been asking for at least $1.3 trillion, a figure which is roughly in line with what economists say will be needed for climate action. But the nations of the world could only agree that larger figure as a target, with no clear indication of where the money might come from.
Yeah, right. And we've got a clip here of one of the reactions to that deal.
The amount that is proposed to be mobilized is abysmally poor. It's a paltry sum. It is not something that will enable conducive climate action that is necessary for the survival of our country and for the growth of our people, their livelihoods. And I'm sorry to say that we cannot accept it.
Yeah, those strong words there, they were from India's delegate Chandani Raina, and she gave this extremely scathing and impassioned, emboldened reaction to it all that received a lot of applause throughout. So you can tell there was quite a lot of people who were unhappy with it. It was also her we heard speaking at the start of the show.
So then with so many people this unhappy about the deal, what does that mean?
So at the heart of this is one of the thorniest problems in climate policy, namely that rich countries like the UK, the US and so on have spent decades, centuries even, emitting carbon dioxide and benefiting from the economic growth. Meanwhile, poorer countries with historically low emissions now want to do the same and are being told that they can't. So ultimately, it does seem fair for historic emitters to fund the clean energy transition in poorer countries, but in reality, as this deal shows, getting them to do so is extremely difficult. And that means countries like India, as we heard, have little enthusiasm for setting out new carbon-cutting plans. These are known in the jargon as Nationally Determined Contributions, or NDCs, and they're due to be presented to the UN in February, although more likely they will dribble out over the course of the next year. And then, of course, this is made even more complicated when you have countries like China, which has rapidly ramped up its emissions and yet doesn't count as a rich country under this framework.
So this is a recurrent issue with COPs that we've discussed on the podcast before. The outcomes are often quite unsatisfactory and they fall short of the science, what the science is telling us is needed. And each year I'm seeing this uptick in people saying the COPs are pointless, they've been captured, they don't make any progress, they're a distraction. Where does that leave us?
Yeah, I think you're right that there's a real growing feeling, and it was notable this year, an intervention in the form of an open letter signed by COP veterans, including former UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, and they called for climate meetings to become more streamlined with a greater focus on delivering carbon-cutting policies. The letter also called for hosting rules to be tightened to only allow those countries taking ambitious climate action to hold the presidency. Of course, this would have excluded this year's host country, Azerbaijan, which is a petrostate with an economy heavily dependent on fossil fuels. And in terms of why the final outcome of each summit now always feels so fraught and unpopular, quite a lot of people are starting to point the finger at Saudi Arabia and Russia in particular as blockers to action who keep vetoing and delaying.
So we've been covering COPs for just a long time on the New Scientist News Desk. What do you think? Should we do away with the COP process?
I'm really in two minds. I mean, it's definitely become a bit of a bloated talking shop. You know, the attendance counts seem to rocket up each year. Lots of peripheral meetings that might distract us from the ultimate goal of getting to net zero. But on the other hand, this is a global problem and we need a global forum to tackle it. I think the really big test is going to be COP30 in Belém, Brazil next year. That's because there's now an increasing acceptance that we have missed the 1.5 degrees C target set by the Paris Agreement. And as countries publish their NDCs, those climate action plans in the run-up to COP30, we will be able to assess just how far off we are. Because remember, every fraction of a degree matters, even if we are over 1.5 C, as seems the case. And if Brazil can use that failure of passing 1.5 C as a wake-up moment, a reassessment of Paris and what we still have to do, then maybe it can make COP useful again.
Yeah, here. Let's really hope that that's the case. 30 hopefully will be the magic number. And of course, with COP30 already being seen as an especially important climate summit, we'll be reporting about this all year leading up to it and beyond. So that will be both on the podcast and in print and online. Okay, so after climate change and bird flu, we could probably do with just a little light relief, perhaps. Yes. So next we've got nuclear Armageddon. No, I'm just kidding. That's not what we're doing. We're actually going to be curling up with some of the year's best books.
Hooray! Yes, we've got our culture editor, Alison Flood, here with us. Hello, Alison.
All 3 pixels of her.
Hi. And Alison recently put together a great roundup of all the best popular science and non-fiction books published this year. So she and the New Scientist team picked out 18 must-reads. We'll link to the full list in our show notes. But for today, let's talk about some of the very best, covering the gamut of science and technology.
Yeah, shall we start with A City on Mars? Alison, I've not read this one yet, but it sounds sounds hilarious.
It's brilliant. Let me just read you the subtitle. It kind of sums it all up. Can we settle space? Should we settle space? And have we really thought this through? So I judged the Royal Society Trivedi Science Book Prize this year. And this, after reading an awful lot of very good science books and some not maybe quite so good science books, was our winner. The authors, they lay out all of the reasons why a Martian colony would be a bad call, from the complexities of having kids in space to how awful it would be if you're an indentured worker on Mars with one boss supplying your food, your oxygen, everything. They even managed to make space law fascinating, and there are cartoons, so I very much recommend it.
And one of the sort of charming things with this is it's a husband and wife duo, isn't it? They wrote something for us recently for New Scientist, and it was brilliant, this piece about how awful it would be to live on Mars. I really don't want to do it.
Yeah, I think they definitely would advise not. Yeah, they are a husband and wife duo. Kelly is a parasitologist and Zach is a cartoonist and an English major. So they came to this subject afresh, which I think really makes the book super readable because you're going on this journey with them as they discover it. I recently interviewed them for the New Scientist Book Club because we're reading it at the moment for that. And I was asking them about how they work together as a husband and wife team. And apparently there are not too many fallings out. So that's good.
Always a risk, isn't it? Very brave. Another book in your roundup, Alison, that really caught my eye was What the Wild Sea Can Be by the marine biologist Helen Scales.
Yeah, this is a really beautiful book. I started it thinking I would feel incredibly gloomy about the state of our oceans by the end of it. But Helen Scales starts 500 million years ago when Earth's waters were full of trilobites. She tells the story of our oceans over the millennia and the creatures that live there. She writes really beautifully, and she makes this impassioned call to protect our seas and our coastlines. And she gets you sharing in her love for the oceans. She puts it so well. She says, living together on this blue planet, we are all ocean people.
We're all ocean people. That's very nice, isn't it?
Yeah.
I love that. It's also worth saying that, yes, we are aware that Helen Scales has got scales in her surname and she's a marine biologist. I remember when I was editing Feedback, our column that often highlights these nominative determinisms, we'd get someone writing in regularly telling us, did you know Helen Scales, she's got a kind of oceany name. But we've got that one. It's been recorded.
No need to log it with us.
Yeah.
Jacob, I wanted to ask you about your recommendation, Frostbite, particularly because this was written by Nicola Twilley, and I love her food science podcast, Gastropod, and she's been talking about the book for years, but I haven't read it yet. Is it good?
Yeah, so I actually only discovered the podcast after reading the book, and I'm enjoying diving into it. But the book itself, I kind of have this weird obsession with sort of supply chain and logistics and things like that. And this is all about the cold chain and how food is distributed, refrigerated throughout the world. And it's really fascinating sort of diving into the history of, how we used to keep things cold before refrigeration. Interestingly, there's sort of a period where refrigerators are these newfangled things and no one quite really trusts them to keep your food nice and fresh and things like that. And also there's, the sort of modern human side of the people who are actually having to work in these huge freezers as they get our food to us. So it's a really fun read. I
love books like that. It kind of reminds me of Ed Conway's book, Material World, where there's this whole chapter about sand that just makes you rethink the importance of sand in the global economy, and you just never even thought about it. Sounds like maybe this does the same for fridges.
Definitely in the same genre.
Yeah. Alison, you've read a lot of science books this year, including Judging the Prize, as you mentioned. Is there any others you'd like to mention in this segment?
Yeah, I'll mention two more. First of all, you promised everyone Nuclear Armageddon at the beginning of this segment, and I would highly recommend Annie Jacobson's Nuclear War, which isn't a fun read, but it imagines what would happen if North Korea launched a nuclear missile at Washington, D.C., kind of how the US would respond, how Russia would then respond to the US's response. She's interviewed loads of military experts and politicians to sort of lay this out. So it's described as a non-fiction thriller, and it's a kind of unputdownable and absolutely terrifying read that I think everyone should read because it's such an important subject.
It's an absolutely incredible book. I read it in a single night because I couldn't stop.
Oh my God.
Because you couldn't sleep.
Yeah.
Probably not one to give as a gift there.
Well, I guess it depends who the recipient is, does it? And then the other book I'd recommend kind of draws a little bit on that too. It's the winner of the other book prize I judged, the Baillie Gifford Prize. It's Question 7 by Richard Flanagan. So this isn't necessarily a science book. It's maybe more of a memoir, but there's a lot of science in it, and I think our readers would really like it. So it is Richard Flanagan's memoir, but it's also about how Leo Szilard dreamed up the atomic bomb and how that links to H.G. Wells, whose book The World Set Free imagines an atomic weapon, which Szilard read and then went on to invent the atomic bomb. And it's about the Tasmanian genocide. It's about the destruction of the Tasmanian rainforest, which is where Flanagan lives. And it's about love, and it's about family and memory. And it's got this incredible scene near the end in which Flanagan narrowly escapes death while he's kayaking, which sent shivers down my spine when I read it. It's doing the same just thinking about it now. Anyway, I really recommend it. I think our readers would love it.
Definitely going on my Christmas list.
Yeah, thanks so much, Alison. To read that full list of the New Scientist team's favourite books of the year, you can click the link in our show notes. And honestly, the roundup is such a good read. I've added so many to my wish list just reading through it.
Yeah, me too. And if you're a keen reader of popular science and science fiction, Alison is, of course, in charge of our New Scientist book club, which is absolutely amazing. If you're not already a part of it, you should be. We discuss some of the very best books, discuss them with book lovers, the authors. There are excerpts, interviews. It's really fantastic. So, Alison, what are you discussing next? You did mention it.
We're reading A City on Mars at the moment, and then we're going to have a Christmas special where we discuss the best ever science fiction short stories.
Amazing. So we'll post a link with more info about all of that and how to sign up in our show notes. That's it for this week. Thanks to all of our guests, and thank you to you for listening. Do tell your friends and fellow ocean people about us and give us a 5-star rating and review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
We'll be back next week. Bye for now.
Bye.